The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL, but we're the ones that have originally, from the very beginning, have encouraged you all along to like and share them on your favorite social media and with all your friends and neighbors because it's Black History Month and you're listening to the African American Scene. And here's your host, brought to you, of course, by Rudy's Health Insurance and Martin County Roofing. Here's your host, the one and only Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here for the African American Scene. We're still on Monday nights. Hopefully we get back to our Wednesday nights in the next couple of weeks when the basketball season's over. Listen, I don't know if any of you saw, but the Nazis had a march through downtown Nashville over the weekend. Boy, does that tell you a little bit about where we are as a country? The Nazis marched right in downtown Nashville over the weekend.
They forgot that they lost the war.
I guess, but we're going to give you. We had a winner last week. Kendall won the African American Trivia Prize, which is a 30-day boot camp at the YMCA. And I'm offering the same prize this week. Here is my question for tonight. Pretty easy, actually. I'm trying to be nice to you. Which of the following actresses is an EGOT recipient? That means they won an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. And here are your choices. Octavia Spencer, Queen Latifah, or Whoopi Goldberg. One of those three is the right answer. You name the right answer and you win the 30-day boot camp training class with the YMCA at no cost. So again, which of the following actresses is an EGOT recipient? Octavia Spencer, Queen Latifah, or Whoopi Goldberg? Okay, if you know the answer, tell me which one and you'll win the prize. Over the years, one of the questions that I have received from conservatives on a continuous basis is, I didn't do it, so why punish me? I had nothing to do with slavery. I didn't actually participate in Jim Crow. So why am I punishing? Why should I be punished? I don't think that's the appropriate way to look at it, and we're going to explore why tonight. But let's first take a look at this Pew Research survey. Pew Research in 2019 asked a wide variety of racial groups whether or not they thought there was still an impact of slavery on Black Americans in today's society. Overall, 31% of adults felt there was a great deal. 32% felt there was a fair amount. So a little over 60-something% have felt that there is still an effect on Black people from slavery. Now, let's get into the ethnic breakdown. Whites felt, for the most part, only 26% felt a great deal, and 32% said a fair amount. That still equals out to 58%. So over 50% of white folks feel that slavery is still having an impact on society today. Without surprise, 59% of Black folks felt as a great deal. Hispanics felt 29% felt it was a great deal. 38% felt it was a fair amount. So that is still uh, over 50% of Hispanics, and Asians, 33% said a great deal, and 35% said a fair amount. So interestingly enough, over 50% of all Americans feel that the impact of slavery is still having an impact on African Americans today. Let's take a look at where we came from and see if we can't figure out why the problem still exists. And more importantly, I would like to hear why you think that it is an issue that has come and gone, should no longer be talked about. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that statement made to me by former conservative associates, and I say former because most of them now I have broken relationships with uh, over the past year for various and sundry issues. Let's talk about first Jim Crow. You hear that term all the time. I'm not sure how many of you really know what that means. And if you want to call in, that phone number is 340-1590. And if you happen to be one of those people that think that the impact of slavery is no longer an issue, I want to hear from you. That's 340-1590. First, let's talk about Jim Crow because, we say that all the time. I'm not sure everybody understands what Jim Crow is. Jim Crow, and we got Winnie on line one. Yes, Winnie.
Oh, good,
How,
good, good.
how are you?
Hi, yeah, I was thinking the movie about I they got Black History Month. I got lots of shows. This Alice, the
Uh,
lady
uh, uh,
named Alice, she was enslaved in Whitewood, Georgia.
what's that now?
1894.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Really,
I can't hear you.
name of it Alice, and then like modern day slave. I said, "Ooh, this really had happened." I'm talking modern day slaves.
EGOT.
And so it was like in the 70s.
Uh, I'm not
You
sure what
there?
you're saying. I can't make out what you're saying, Winnie.
Hallelujah. Yeah, but Alice, that's the name of the movie, Alice.
Oh, yes. I did
Like his
I did see that
movie.
about
Anyway, it seemed like to go be a rematch of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. might
yeah.
go be a rematch of that and Donald Trump. All right, I have to listen to that video.
Okay, all righty. I I did see that movie that she was talking about. And Common is one of the lead actors in the movie about a lady that was being kept on a plantation and in kind of modern times, and then discovered that she was on a plantation. It's an interesting movie. I saw another movie this weekend. I challenge you to watch it. It'd be very disturbing. It's called 88, and it's about a black presidential candidate. Uh, the movie's called 88. Interesting. So let's talk about what is Jim Crow exactly. Again, if you want to call up and you want to challenge me regarding this issue of why punish me, that phone number is 340-1590. Jim Crow is defined as discrimination laws created to have a detrimental effect on people of color. That was the nature of Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow laws came about after slaves were freed. And what did they do, Jim Crow laws? They restricted the rights of people of color, such as white water fountains, black water fountains. People of color were unable to eat at lunch counters, unable to eat at restaurants, inside the restaurants, restrictions on where people of color could live, restrictions on how people of color rode transportation. And under the Jim Crow laws, there was restrictions on who people could marry. Boy, you know, that's one for the books right there. I mean, that's long gone, but just think about all those things there about you couldn't go in and sit down and have a meal. And the Jim Crow period lasted from 1877, and its official end is 1965 by the historians, but we all know at 1965, Jim Crow laws did not cease voluntarily. There was litigation and other avenues that had to be pursued ultimately to end some of the Jim Crow laws that had been put in place. But think about that, if you would. As a young Black person, I grew up in the North, so I didn't see it as much as my wife did, who grew up in North Carolina. And you're walking downtown and you see a white water fountain and a black water fountain. You see a white waiting area and a colored waiting area. If you wanted to get something to eat, more often than not, you had to go around to the back door of the restaurant to receive your food, and you couldn't go in there and sit down and eat it. Just think about that. Being a young person, imagine having to deal with that. Then we go to Brown versus the Board of Education. That was supposed to end segregated schools and allow for people of color to get education on par with everybody else. While that Supreme Court ruling was in 1950, you know, it lingered on and on and on long beyond the official ruling. Right here in St. Lucie County, when I came here, the schools were under receivership for failure to implement desegregation laws for the countywide. So again, think about that. So what was some of the effects of ending with Brown versus the board? Thousands of Black educators lost their jobs. Okay. So while the goal was to make a more equitable educational opportunity for people of color, one of the byproducts of that ruling was the firing of thousands of uh, teachers of color from their jobs because white folks were unwilling to allow their kids to be taught by people of color. That's fact. And people in my age group, uh, being a teacher was aspirational and considered a way to earn a decent living after having successfully completed a college education. That was something that was a target for many people in my age group to become a teacher in their hometown or in the town in which they were educated. And we have Steve for the trivia question. Yes, sir.
How you doing, Rudy?
Okay.
Good. Um, let me ask you something. Don't you think it's not really society's role as a whole to be role models, but it's individual parents? It's society that's causing the problem with their rules started back in the 50s when if you got welfare, the father couldn't live in the house. So that put a generation of young men out there that didn't have a father figure. And it's just kept on and kept on. Where basically we're back to the 1850s and it's time to knock it off.
So are you suggesting that part of the major problem is that uh, there were absence of black fathers in the home, which has led to I'm listening.
Yes, because I'll tell you something. Our major focus in this country is on football, not science, not history, not education. And it's showing in our textbooks, it's showing in a lot of ways. But it all starts in the home where you have a strong father and a strong mother. And that takes a whole society to support that system. Our government hasn't supported that system for 50 years.
I'm not sure I'm going to agree with that. The government, uh, I don't think, is responsible for the dissolution of the black family. That there's a
Made
litany
the
of
rule.
things. I'm sorry.
They made the rule that the father couldn't live in the house if you got welfare benefits. Isn't
Well,
that direct hands-on involvement?
well, I'd say that's true, but that is one symptom of a bunch of different things that took place. You had uh, when I was a teenager, you had a situation where you had young men who were, if they got in trouble and they went before the judge, you either went to Vietnam or you went to jail. So there was a very
I
large group.
know.
There was a very large group of young black men who went to Vietnam who might otherwise have been productive citizens, but weren't given much of a choice. And
There was a large
historically,
number of all kinds of men and women that went to Vietnam that shouldn't have. I totally agree.
yeah, yeah.
But the point I'm making is you have to have a balance in the family. It has to have a male or female. It has to have guidance for that young man and guidance for that young lady. And that's what lacked in the black families for years because of government rules. They were poor to begin with, so they got some help. And in order to get the help, you couldn't have the father in the house. Look it up. It's a fact.
Well, no, I can't disagree with you. I know that what you're just saying is true. But I think that's a small element of the overall problem, to be honest with you. But I would say that is an issue for sure. But that is only a small element of the total problem as far as black families are concerned. But I got to let you know because I got another caller here.
Okay, thank you, Rudy.
Thank you, Steve. All right, and we got Dominic. Yes, Dominic.
Rudy,
Yes, sir.
hey, nice to hear you. I can't believe the monologue you just gave. That current governor would tell you that none of that happened. That's all just left-wing propaganda. But I know for a fact what you're saying actually happened. And then the class system that really exists, I too was given the choice to go to jail or go to Vietnam. And it took me a lot of years to get over Vietnam. But I think in the bottom of my heart right now, this particular administration and a majority of the Republican Party are blind to the real facts. They just want this kind of crazy Norman Rockwell idea of what they think America is about.
I think that that statement you just made is very accurate. There is this rosy picture of what an American family should look like. And anything absent of that is a failure. And we have so many so many successful people in this country who did not come from that nuclear family of a Norman Rockwell type, so
Right.
and it's unfair. And I'm going to tell you, I feel so blessed. I grew up with a mother and father, and a father who worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. So I grew up in that family. But I know some very successful people who were raised by a single parent.
See,
And the thing that I object to most about those statements about the black family is I know black fathers who really worked hard to have relationships with their kids, even if they were working with the impediment of what the welfare situation required in order for their family to get help. But I know I saw them leave early in the morning, going to work, and come home with dust all over themselves at the end of the day after they went out and worked hard. And a lot of those jobs that allow people to gain a living, a decent living at manufacturing facilities, et cetera, are just not available anymore because of the change in the economy. So
yeah, but let's look at what you said about this rosy picture. Let's take out nepotism and born into, the current billionaire class or like that. There's a wonderful quote, and I can't remember who made it, but it says, "Behind every great fortune is a great crime." But that said, this other nonsense about by the bootstraps, and I happen to know you personally, and I know how hard you work. But the fact is, this up by your bootstraps, For the majority of the white population, that's a cruise down the freeway. For the people of color, it's a hurdle race. It's every time you get a little bit ahead, you get stuck with some other kind of blatant reactionary, racist, homophobic, xenophobic nonsense. And right now, I'm 78 years old, Rudy. I've seen a couple of what I would call lame Congresses, but I've never seen anything like this. Never in my lifetime did I imagine that the entire body of the Congress would spend 3 years doing nothing but investigating each other and blaming each other for the exact same things they do. I don't know what to do, you know, and I just keep trying to write my books and tell my own truths with my own voice. But I sure appreciate what you do on the radio every week, and I want to tell you that.
Well, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate you for being a listener.
Thank you, Rudy.
All right, you take care. Good man, Dominic. I got one of his books. I bought one of his books some time ago. So let me tell you now. So we had the unintended consequence of thousands of Black educators losing their jobs. And they lost their jobs because white parents at that time refused to allow their children to be taught by Black educators. Now, another byproduct of that is, and I really didn't understand this coming from the North until I married my wife, and I got a clear picture of how the segregated schools in the South worked. Most of those teachers that were teaching in those segregated high schools were highly trained teachers, many of them from HBCUs. And because the communities were segregated at the time, they were in the same community with the parents. So the teacher would go to the store, and they may be in the store where your mom and dad is, and they could bump into your mom and dad and have a word to say about how you're performing in class. So there was this community feeling that the teachers had teaching in those segregated communities that created a bond for children and teachers that was absent for those of us that went to segregated schools in the North. Completely different MO, completely. And let me tell you about the dirty little secret about that. In the North, if they wanted to punish a teacher, they would send a white teacher to an all-Black school. See, you don't hear that. And for us in the North, we're thinking, oh, poor Southerners, Southern Black people, they get treated so badly. Well, they had teachers that cared about them. Even they might have been in segregated schools and had used books, as my wife once told me they did. They had hand-me-down books, but they had teachers that cared about them. And in the North, we had teachers that were banished to segregated schools as a form of punishment. And most of the teachers in the segregated schools in the North were white teachers, not Black teachers. The Black teachers in my junior high school were shop teachers, the metal shop teacher, the electric shop teacher, and the music teacher were African American. All the rest of the teachers were white. And many of these teachers that had been banished to these segregated schools were really not interested in teaching these Black kids. They were there to collect a paycheck and accept the punishment that they received for whatever reason and serve out their term for retirement at this Black school. And I'm not speaking from I am speaking from personal experience. I had one of those teachers who taught English in 8th grade, and we threw spitballs and stuck pencils on the ceiling, and I got a B plus or an A, and I did absolutely nothing. I learned nothing, and I thought it was cool because I got a good grade and didn't do anything. But the whole point of the matter was, and she sat in the front of the class, turned us to turn to page 12 in the book, and she sat there and read a newspaper. That was indicative of the kind of experience many African Americans and people of color had when they went to a segregated school up north. So while the one hand, there was a disadvantage in the segregated schools that my wife went to, there was additional problem in the north with the kind of teachers that we ended up having. Now I can think of, and I don't want to say all teachers because it's not true, because one teacher in particular stood out in my mind, Mr. Trauma, who was a white teacher who cared deeply about the students in his class, and he was a good teacher, and he was a science teacher. But for the most part, those teachers just really didn't care. So think about that. So what are reparations? We hear that term all the time. I'm not so sure many of you really understand what reparations are. So let's see if we can't unpack this. Reparations are making amends for a wrong by paying money or otherwise helping those who have been wronged, who have been wronged. So it's not necessarily money, but it can be money. So why are you so that's what the nature of reparations are. So just so you understand, it's trying to correct a wrong. Has the United States made reparations in the past? The answer is yes. Reparations were paid to the slave owners in 1865 at the end of the Civil War, and the slaves were freed. The government paid the slave owners reparations for the loss of their quote unquote property, that being slaves. In 1980, the US Supreme Court ordered the US to pay $105 million to the Sioux Nation for illegal seizure of their land. There was some reparations to the Sioux Indians. Evanston, Illinois passed a reparations law in 2019 based on historic housing discrimination. And if you can remember some of the civil rights marches, the march that Martin Luther King had in Chicago was shocking to him, and often said it was more hatred in Chicago than he had experienced in Mississippi. So Evanston has passed a law that will give people who are trying to buy a house in Evanston, Illinois, a little pocket of money to help them on that journey. The other area where reparations has been awarded is in Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville, North Carolina awarded $2.1 million in reparations due to housing discrimination and employment discrimination. And there's a reparations bill pending in San Francisco. So, and I will tell you, I have personally been back and forth on this idea of reparations, but for the wrong reason. I felt reparations would cause more racial disunity, even though I thought reparations might be proper. I don't advocate for cash, but I do think reparations are appropriate given some of the past injustices people of color experienced. So, why do you object to reparations? I'm interested. That phone number is 340-1590. Now, based on what I have just outlined for you, do you think people of color have been damaged by slavery and some of the discrimination activities of the past? Do I blame all white people? The answer to that is absolutely, categorically no. There have been white people who have fought and died for some of the rights that we now enjoy. So no, I do not blame all white folks for some of the issues that we have. But here's the issue. Should we make pretend that these things didn't happen? Do you think that solves the problem of making pretend these problems never existed? I want you to get this because because this is really important for you to understand. The damage caused by these things I've outlined to you are mental traumas. They're like thousands of little paper cuts all over your body. And if you can't get them to heal, you just constantly have a flow of blood from these little cuts. And those little cuts, what do? They affect your self-esteem. Can you imagine you're a little kid and you're going to the movies and you're told you can't sit downstairs, you have to sit upstairs? Why? Because you're a person of color? You're a kid and you're going downtown in Raleigh. There's a white fountain and a black fountain, and you have to drink from the black fountain. Why? was your person of color. You can't go to the swimming pool in the community because they think that your black skin will somehow affect the quality of the water that people are swimming in. So as a result, you have a whole generation of black kids that can't swim. And what's one of the #1 killers of young black kids? Drowning, because most of their parents can't swim. So I'm asking you, do you think, based on what I have outlined for you, that people of color were damaged by any of these things? I would tell you something else. There are black people in Fort Pierce that don't want to live among white folks because of that conditioning. They don't trust them. They're afraid that they will be automatically treated unfairly. Whether it's true or not true, that is a byproduct of a lifetime of conditioning. It's just like I was participating in a program recently, and I talked about how, as a young kid, 10, 12 years old, and we had our little black and white TV, and when we saw a black person come on TV, we called out to everybody in the house to run and come look at the TV. Now, how ridiculous is that? That seems ridiculous. In 2024, I know you're saying to yourself, well, really? Yes, really. Yes, really, that happened. It was so rare to see a person of color on TV. It was like a monumental event in your household when you saw somebody. Why is that? That is conditioning. Conditioning that you were not good enough to be there in that box to entertain people. All of those things. So why are you opposed to reparations? Why are you opposed to trying to right some wrongs that have been done that caused a tremendous amount of damage to the self-esteem of young African-American people, people of color? Why didn't I get affected? Fortunately for me, I had a mother that was like a brain surgeon, and she was telling me from the time I was a little kid, #1, I was going to college. I didn't have any choice. That was something that was you're going to go. And I can remember by the time I was graduating from high school, I was angry that I didn't even have a choice about whether I was going to go, but I was going to go. And her constantly telling me I could be anything I wanted to be, and that was pounded into my brain, and it made a difference. No question, it made a difference. So when that teacher in high school told me I was not college material, boy, when that teacher in high school told me I wasn't college material, and I came home and I told my mother absolutely went berserk. And we got Curtis online. Well, yes, Curtis.
Good evening, Rudy. How you doing?
Okay.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And the conditioning is hundreds of years of slavery.
Yes, sir.
And another one of the things, as far as economics, is all of that slavery was no pay. And then we went out of that situation to sharecropping, which was shortly sometime after emancipation. And even today, the prisons in the United States, some of them, not all of them, they grow products and goods and services for you big stores and all those other people that buy the goods that the inmates grow, and they make 5 to 7 cents a day.
That's
And
right.
75% of these people are Afro-American, so it's modern day slavery all over. And it's just so many things that the United States or the world or the people, not the government, because we are the government of this country. The people is the government. And for some reason, we don't want to say that we're the government, but we've got the right to vote and change things as they come along. But it's not about what you've got and who's going to take it from you. Everything that's here belongs to all of us, and we deserve to get a fair slice of that pie.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, when we talk about the need for making an adjustment like reparations, some people take that as an anti-white statement. It's not anti-white at all. It's about providing an equitable opportunity for people who have not always had an equal opportunity in the past. And that's what it's all about. And it's really about uplifting your brother. And since we are all Americans together, we should all be concerned to see that all Americans have opportunities and are successful. I don't know what's complicated about that.
Well, I mean, Rudy, for the people that read and want to know, there's always been reparations in this United States. I think you talked about a couple of occasions with different groups of people for different reasons, but reparations in the definition, if you take a look and see that even when you sue somebody for something that they did to you or harmed you or took your livelihood away, that case and that what you win through the court of law is not called a reparation, but it is a reparation because it's repairing you.
Yeah.
And everybody's entitled to that. What's fair?
Yep. Yep.
But
I thank
got
you,
a little
sir.
request, Rudy, and
Yes.
I don't know how you're doing on time, but I come from a part of Georgia that, in all of Georgia and the South, even Florida and South Carolina, and all of those were the towns and stuff where the people were bought and sold, and that was about the best they could do. But when I go back up there, I get a feeling about me, and I can almost hear the crying and screaming and looking at the red clay, and it's redder than it should be, and that's the blood of the people that suffered for so long trying to straighten out some of this stuff. And if I could, I'd like to read it. It'll only take a minute, Rudy.
Okay.
I'm calling it, I Feel Like I Belong There. And it says, can you imagine visiting a place where your family roots are, not knowing exactly where you are, or where you're going, but feeling like you've traveled those roads before. The dusty red clay roads of Scriven County and Bullock County, these are towns in Georgia. All the small towns and farmlands, the backwoods of Horse Creek, the pecan trees of Savannah, Georgia, the spaced out shacks of Metter. These are a few of the places where our ancestors were born as slaves. From all that's told to me, all strong, proud, smart people. People with good words as well as good with their hands. They knew exactly what to say, what to do to be able to survive those hundreds of years of slavery. They knew that God had a plan. Time would bring about a change.
Well, thank you, my brother. I appreciate those words. And you have a good
In the midst
evening.
of a change, Rudy.
Yeah, we're gonna make a
And
change. We're gonna make it.
will
We're gonna
be-
make it.
it
We're
will
gonna
be
make a
changed.
change a little bit at a time. We're gonna make it happen.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And in
you.
closing, I just want to say this to my listeners. Do I believe there will be a point at which the vestiges of slavery will be in our past? Yes, but it's not today. And I'm going to give you an analogy to take you home with. Think about golf. When a golfer with a low handicap plays against a golf with a high handicap, there is a system that allows for an offset so that there can be a fair game. That's all we're talking about here, is having a fair game. And the fair game here is the American society as a whole. I'd like to thank you so much for listening. God bless and be safe. And I will see you next Monday, right here for the African American Scene.
The African American Scene with Rudy Howard. Mondays for the time being. We'll be back to Wednesday once we are finishing up with IRSC basketball. This is WPSL, Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast, webcaster to the world, where the time is 7 o'clock right now.